Welcome back to the show, guys. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, I'm taking you back with me to my roots, back to my roots as a holistic nutritionist. Now, I've always been obsessed with the power of food and the power that it has to play in human health. I want to talk to you about honey because over the last little while, there are a couple of products that have come my way that have really, really impressed me. And they're all honey based and they're all actually honey. And so that got me thinking and digging into what is it about honey? What's the big deal? So it turns out that honey is not just another sugar. If we're not buying, that beehive shaped container that's been ultra processed at the grocery store, if we're actually buying quality honey, honey's one of those foods that's been around since forever, really, and has been used medicinally in a million different ways for eons. So consider that honey that's been discovered in Egyptian tombs that was in sealed containers is still safe to eat. And that's not just any food, right? Like clearly, there's something special about this stuff that allows it to remain good for generations, for hundreds, thousands of years. So let's talk a little bit about what honey really is. So what happens is the bees go, they pollinate flowers, they pick up the pollen and they store it in a separate sac. That sac is not their stomach. They have a stomach, the pollen gets stored in a different sac. And then when they get back to the hive, they bring it back, they combine it with enzymes, and then it becomes honey and they make all the things that they make in the beehive with it, which is pretty amazing. Now, honey, because of those enzymes, because of all those natural processes, all of the things that the bees do with the honey now becomes a food, and it is the food for the hive. And it's interesting that this food not only feeds a hive, but also can feed us in some very, very different ways. So let's talk about a few of the different ways that honey's been used and continues to be used for humans. So it's been used for beauty, right? It's been said that in Egyptian times, the women would use honey for their skin because it made their skin glow. So as a topical treatment. So today we have a company called Living Libations, and Living Libations is this amazing company in Canada that actually has beautiful essential oils. Everything on that website is whole and natural and clean. And they actually have a few beauty products made with honey. They have a frankincense face mask. I think they have some hair products made with honey. Really, again, very interesting kind of line of thinking. So it has topical benefits and it kind of makes sense because there's enzymes in there and enzymes are going to interact with our own face biome and have some benefits. So you could probably almost eat that face mask. It's so clean. But regardless, I digress. It's also been used to heal wounds. So topically, it was applied as a poultice on wounds, right, on the skin. As a matter of fact, it was used in World War One. And I will tell you another funny story is that my grandfather told me a story about how he had gotten hurt on his arm. He'd had a massive wound. And the way that he was treated, and this is back in the old country, not in North America, but the way he was treated was they made him a poultice with honey. And I can promise you that in those days, it was actually raw honey. And so we know that raw honey definitely has different properties than honey that's been pasteurized, and certainly honey that's been ultra pasteurized. So wound healing is another way that honey gets used or has been used through the ages. There's also in Ayurvedic medicine, they will use honey somehow. And don't be taking your honey and dropping it into your eyes, people. But they do use honey to treat certain eye conditions. Interestingly enough, honey also has very powerful antimicrobial properties, and that means it's antifungal and antibacterial. It also acts as a prebiotic in our own gut. So it acts to feed the bacteria in our own gut to keep a healthy gut. Now, getting back to this whole story of honey as sugar. So, yes, it's super sweet. Yes, it is glucose. As a matter of fact, the type of glucose and fructose that you get from honey actually is a slow burning sugar. So, it can also be used for endurance activities. Of course, your keto athlete is not going to use honey for their endurance activities, but an athlete that is more carb based might be able to use honey as a source of energy during their event. Now, what's really interesting is that it is slow absorbing, so it goes into the bloodstream more slowly than like just a bolus of sugar, and so as a result, it's going to provide more steady energy. Now, the paradox here, for those of you who are sitting there thinking, oh my God, Nat's lost her mind, she's going to turn us all into a bunch of diabetics. It turns out that there's actually some literature that shows that type 2 diabetics can do really well with honey. I know, it's a paradox. So, there is a type of sugar in honey called trehalose, Trehalose. It's actually a sugar that you can buy it on its own without the honey. I will use it sometimes to sweeten my coffee in the mornings. And what's interesting about trehalose is it actually is blood sugar balancing. It will not spike your blood sugar. It doesn't create like this crazy insulin spike. And it's got lots of other properties. It can trigger autophagy. It's actually super interesting. It's almost deserves its own podcast, but we're not going to go there today. I really want to stay focused on the whole honey story. So, at the end of this podcast, I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about making sure that we're buying honey, the right honey. But right now, I just want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the health benefits and some of the studies that have come out about honey's medicinal benefits. So, number one, powerful antioxidant. Honey is rich in antioxidants, including flavonoids and polyphenols, which combat oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, that's those reactive oxygen species that are created when your cells are overwhelmed. And so this may, over time, reduce the risk of chronic diseases. We're going to talk about dosing in a minute because I just want to caution you guys, I'm not advocating for people to be chugging gallons of honey every day, but we're talking about responsible consumption. Let's just say this stuff's delicious, so it would be easy to overdo it, but in appropriate amounts, actually a great source of antioxidants. There's also the story of the trehalose that I was talking about a minute ago. And in addition to triggering autophagy, also seems to have shown benefits for preventing fatty liver disease. It reduces inflammation and oxidative stress as well. It can lower postprandial blood sugar in healthy individuals, with increased postprandial blood sugar. It may prevent the progression of type 2 diabetes. So that's trehalose specifically. And it increases energy expenditure and the production of beige fat cells. So beige fat, we know that's the brown fat that is metabolically active. And that's the fat we want. If you could choose your fat, you would be choosing the beige over the white every day. And finally, it's the trehalose that also is the component that helps with endurance. Okay, let's move on to another one. MGO is glyoxal has antibacterial and antiviral properties. Now, MGO is predominantly found in one particular type of honey that we'll talk about at the end. It exhibits very strong antibacterial properties that have been shown to be effective against various pathogens. We're going to link to the study in the show notes here. Now, honey's antiviral properties are attributed to the potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activities, which may attenuate oxidative damage induced by pathogens. So it punches above its weight, right? This is what's fascinating about this compound, or this food actually is what we should call it. So we talked about the wound healing and antimicrobial properties, and those are attributed to the content of phenolic compounds in honey. We've got another study for you for that as well. And its antibacterial effects are due to the production of hydrogen peroxide as well as high osmolarity, which inhibits bacterial growth. So it's doing it from a couple of different pathways here. Also, anti-inflammatory effects, which we mentioned earlier. So this is flavonoids and polyphenols in honey exhibit anti-inflammatory properties, potentially aiding in reducing inflammation overall. It also supports the immune system. So we've all heard, oh, you think you're getting a cold, make yourself like some hot water with lemon and honey. You'll do way better if the honey that you use is a medicinal honey. And again, like I said, at the end of this, I'm going to talk about 3 different ones that have come across my radar lately that bear mentioning. This is where, again, the honey's antioxidant components are helping to combat oxidative stress, potentially boosting the immune system. And so we'll often do the hot water with lemon and honey. The thing that's important here is, particularly if you're using a very high quality raw honey, you don't want to boil it. So you want to make sure that you let the water come off the boil, let it cool a tiny bit, and then you're going to stir your honey in so you don't destroy it. As I mentioned earlier, it also acts as a prebiotic, promoting the growth of beneficial gut bacteria, which ultimately can enhance digestive health. Finally, really interesting is that there are several studies that have investigated the anti-proliferative properties of a specific honey and its potential to inhibit cancer cell growth. Manuka honey, and particularly very high quality Manuka honey, is powerful enough that there's a lot of scientific studies going on trying to see exactly how this stuff works and how it's able to do what it does. So, a little bit about Manuka honey, and that is the honey that comes from New Zealand. And it is honey that is made from bees that exclusively pollinate Manuka tree flowers, which is the tea tree. Now, if I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of tea tree oil, but tea tree oil is a very powerful antimicrobial, it's very medicinal oil. And so this is the honey that these honeybees make specifically from this pollen. It only flowers for about 6 to 8 weeks a year, so it's very rare, and as a result, you will notice that it can be pretty spendy. So this is not the cheap stuff. I've seen Manuka honey out there for very, very inexpensive. Just know that there's different grades of Manuka honey. So this is big enough that it's being actually studied in clinical trials. So this is an intravenous administration of Manuka honey, which is shown to inhibit tumor growth in murine melanoma model. So what this study did is they explored the effects of Manuka honey on various cancer cell lines, including murine melanoma. And the references are going to be in the show notes. So anybody who needs to dig into this can go find them. Colorectal carcinoma, as well as human breast cancer cells. The finding demonstrated that Manuka honey exerted a potent anti-proliferative effect in a time and dose-dependent manner, with effectiveness observed at concentrations as low as 0.6%. The mechanism involved activation of a caspase 9 dependent apoptotic. So that's apoptosis is when the cell dies, pathway leading to cell death. So these are not human trials. So this is not a treatment for anybody's cancer, but very interesting that this very specific honey seems to have these effects on these specific cancer cell lines. Another one is where Manuka honey was shown to inhibit human breast cancer progression in a murine xenograft model. And so what happened here is researchers investigated the impact of Manuka honey on human breast cancer cells. So we're getting a little closer, right, to the human case studies here, both in vitro and in vivo. The study revealed that oral administration of Manuka honey significantly inhibited tumor growth in mice by 84% without affecting normal breast cells or causing major side effects. This is huge, right? Like, what if this could be extrapolated or turned into a treatment eventually for humans? The honey reduced levels of signaling pathways involved in tumor cell growth and survival, such as AMPK, AKT, mTOR, and STAT3. Again, we've got a reference for you on that one as well. So Manuka honey induces apoptosis of epithelial cancer cells through intracellular reactive ROS and calcium ion elevation. So what this research did is they focused on the mechanisms by which Manuka honey induce cell death in cancer cells. Again, going after those cancer cells, the study observed that Manuka honey could alter intracellular reactive oxygen species. It's going after the ROS and calcium ion concentration, leading to apoptosis. So, again, cell death in epithelial cancer cells. This effect was enhanced by Manuka honey's ability to maintain high hydrogen peroxide. Remember, we talked about that previously. Permeability through aquaporin 3 channels. So basically, what we're saying here is that honey in general has all these benefits. Manuka honey specifically has a lot more. But with Manuka honey, you do have to be careful that you're getting potent Manuka honey. The challenge with Manuka is once people figured out that it was a thing, you've got all kinds of bad actors out there, either diluting it massively or, or maybe there's a lot of ethics around beekeeping. There's a practice in beekeeping where what they'll do is they'll strip the hive of all the honey so that through the winter when the bees go dormant, they're not able to feed on their own honey through the winter. What they do instead is they just replace the honey with high fructose corn syrup, something like that. So something that is essentially nutritionally void. So it gives the bees energy, but it doesn't give them the nutrients that they need. And that very often will lead to colony collapse. And that is where, when we talk about ethically produced honey, that's where all that comes in. Also, people are moving their hives around or forcing the honeybees to be monocrop honeys. Although with the Manuka honeys, I think that's a very specific type of bee that goes after a specific flower. So with the Manuka honey, you do have to be mindful that you're dealing with a company that's buying or acquiring their honey from responsible beekeepers. And as a result, the Manuka honey that they generate, we talked about MGOs before, that factor. So the MGO level is what dictates how potent the honey is. So they have a honey that is over 850 on the scale of MGO. And when you scan the QR code, it's going to tell you who is the beekeeper that actually produced your honey. And it also will give you the MGO level of the particular batch of honey that you have. And you'll notice, like I'm on my second or third jar of this stuff, and you will notice that there's a difference in color and taste from one jar to the next. So that's the Manuka honey that I wanted to talk to you about. Now, there's another company that I've known for much longer than Manukora, and many of you may have heard of these guys, called Beekeepers Naturals. And Beekeepers Naturals is really interesting because they got into this using honey as a medicinal or representing honey as a medicinal to the mainstream years and years ago. I remember like the very first biohacking event that I ever went to, which was actually in Toronto, and it was well over 10 years ago. These guys had a booth and I was blown away by their stuff. And that's where I got introduced to a couple of their products that to this day, I never travel without them, and I'm just never without it. And one of them is this bee propolis throat spray. Now, propolis is different from honey. Some of you may know this, but propolis is this antiseptic sort of wax that honeybees produce. And let's say there's an intruder into the beehive. The honeybees will sting it to death because, of course, can't have the intruder in there. But then they have to make sure that that intruder doesn't kill the hive by rotting and bringing in diseases. And so what they do is they embalm it in bee propolis, and it kind of keeps it sterile and it never harms the hive. I'll tell you a couple of other stories about bee propolis. I had a teacher when I went back to school to become a nutritionist. She swore up, down, and sideways that bee propolis saved her leg from flesh-eating disease. Now, I think that's a little bit extreme. I would say that if I had flesh-eating disease, it might not be the first thing I would go for, but if I was lost in the jungle, it's the only thing I had, I would probably use it. But I will tell you that I have on occasion used bee propolis while traveling on cuts, and it is incredibly powerful. Now, the other product that Beekeepers Naturals has that uses bee propolis is their throat spray. And I will use that when I'm traveling. And if at the very first sign of a cold or a sore throat, Propolis spray, very often it can be extremely helpful at knocking whatever it is out, or at least helping you along. They also have royal jelly, it's pollen, and it's also honey, and it's literally a medicinal. It's you would take a teaspoon of it a day. Royal jelly is what the bees feed their baby bees, and it's also exclusively what they feed to the queen, and that's why she gets bigger and lives longer than all the other bees. So, they also have that, and it'll set you back a few bucks. Like, a jar of that stuff's pretty pricey, but it's a very different kind of energy you get from this food. And then, I think those are the 2 standout products for me with Beekeepers Naturals. And last but not least, there's a 3rd company that's come across my radar that really got me going on honey, and it's a company out of Czechoslovakia called Wise Earth, and Wise is WYSE, Earth. And what Wise Earth has done is they are not so much using honey because of its medicinal properties, but they're using it as a carrier for other potent medicinal compounds. The founder of the company is founded this company in honor after his sister tragically died of cancer, and that sent him on a quest for medicinals. He came across a man who had himself had an incredible story using honey and medicinal mushrooms together. And without taking you through the big long story, he and his business partner met with these traditional Chinese medicine masters and basically tapped into this whole branch of medicinals where the honey is used as a carrier and as a delivery mechanism for medicinal mushrooms. So what they developed was there's one formula called the longevity formula, and it's, I think, about 5 or 6 different medicinal mushrooms and all the big guys that you've heard of, like the chaga, the reishi, the cordyceps. There's maitake, shiitake in there. There may even be some, not sure if there's lion's mane, but what they've done is they've sourced 25 to 1 powerful tinctures. So these are very, very strong mushroom tinctures, and they are formulated in a very specific ratio. So it's not equal parts this and that. There's nothing haphazard about this honey. It is used to deliver these beta glycans. Now, the beta glycans are part of what's the medicinal piece of the mushroom extract. Beta glucans are massive molecules. And so the relationship with honey is that honey makes those massive molecules easier and more bioavailable to our cells. And so as a result, the honey ends up amplifying the potency of the medicinal mushrooms. And I've just gotten to know these guys recently. They've got some pretty powerful anecdotal stories. They've got 30,000 customers in the Czech Republic and people healing from all kinds of autoimmune issues, gut issues, even skin issues. They have one example of a client who had really bad psoriasis, and after 3 months, just 3 months of taking a teaspoon a day of this honey, not applying it topically, but just taking it internally, found that the psoriasis resolved really well. There's a couple of examples even of veterinarian type applications with people with dogs with growths, where they would feed the dog a teaspoon a day, and after a couple of months, things just started to look a whole lot better. So a lot of it is anecdotal. In this case, we don't particularly have a lot of clinical trials yet. We have a lot of research around medicinal mushrooms, but this combination of the honey with the medicinal mushrooms is a little bit more novel, I think, to the Western world. I think it's something that's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for a lot longer, but really, really interesting. So I myself, these days, I'm a teaspoon a day girl. I'm doing a teaspoon a day of my Manuka honey, and I'm doing a teaspoon a day of my longevity honey with the mushrooms. And I'm also using a detox formula because I was in a tropical country not too long ago. I suspect that I may have brought, a hitchhiker home with me. So their detox formula has black elder in it. It has wormwood. So it has a couple of very powerful medicinals that might be helpful at evicting unwelcome guests. So yeah, so that's Wise Earth is the company that's using the honey to as a carrier. So in their case, the honey has been pasteurized. I don't think it's a high heat pasteurization, but they've definitely chosen to really use the honey more as a vehicle than the actual medicinal agent itself. And then we've got the Manuka honey, where you're accessing the most potent medicinal honey of its own kind. So this is where honey as a medicinal is elevated to its highest level. And then you have Beekeepers Naturals, where these guys are basically taking honey and turning it into a bunch of different products. They actually also have these bee shots, they call them, that are like energy shots using honey without any kind of caffeine or anything. So that's my journey on the whole bee and honey topic. Oh, the last thing I want to say is for young children, for babies under the year of 1, it is not recommended to give them honey because they can contract botulism from it. And so as much as it might be tempting to give little babies honey, it is not a good idea to do that. And last but not least, feel that it is very important for me to say, be moderate in your consumption of honey. As delicious and as magical and as medicinal as it is, a couple of teaspoons a day goes a long way. With Manuka, they're recommending 1 or 2 teaspoons a day. With the longevity honey, again, it's 1 or 2 teaspoons a day. The detox honey is 1 teaspoon a day. So we're not talking cups of honey here. We're talking about small amounts, using it as medicine, right? Instead of just as a sweetener. So, with the mushrooms, those mushrooms I can promise you, would taste pretty darn awful. And as it turns out, with honey as their carrier, they taste delicious. So that's it for me for today. Thank you so much for being here, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. And we'll be back with other high tech, shiny new things. But I thought for today, it might be interesting to kind of go into the food is medicine bag of tricks. So thanks for being here. If you get value from this episode, please make sure to share it with your friends, your families, your networks, and please make sure to leave us a review. Until we meet again, thank you so much.